Well, hello there, Mum. I thought I'd do a video message rather than write a letter, because I think maybe you quite enjoy those, but we'll see how it goes. So here we go. So I thought I'd give you some news first of all. So this last weekend we went to see Francesca on Sunday in Swansea and took her out for a Sunday lunch at a pub, and we had to sit outside and it was a bit chilly, but then again we had a nice roast dinner. Well, I did at least. Francesca had a risotto, and Wendy too. She had another roast dinner. And of course, then we could have a nice walk on the beach, being Swansea Bay, being so nice. Um, and we had Yarrow with us, so we were able to take her on the beach, and she loved that. We were able to let her off and let her run, which is always good value. And when I got back, and I felt guilty because I'd not done it for a week, I was reminded to make a phone call. Susie had been speaking. Susie Waters had been speaking to Jean McCadden, who I knew as Jean McCardle, of course, my first music teacher. And I did phone her because Susie had said that she has harbored long held affectionate memories of me singing. I guess after her coaching me to do it, particularly a carol at the Finnegans. And she remembers us all being there and me standing alone with Tony on his violin and maybe Prim on the piano, or maybe Dad, or you even, and singing a carol that wasn't maybe normally sung by most people, but she'd probably helped me sing it. And she said, when I reached the top note, she knew it was all worth it. And as a music teacher, I guess maybe that is everything, is it? When your pupil succeeds. Whereas I can't remember the exact incident, but I do remember the sort of terror of being stood on my own and trying to make good. But I'm sure that the audience were most kind and very receptive. But it was lovely to speak to her, and I have promised that when I'm next over with you lot, I will try and make my journey to see her in Hollywood. And I dare say she'll make me sing again, which would be funny, because she's still playing the piano at 91 in churches and things. And she said she'd be very keen to hear and play for me while I sang, which is funny. But there you go. So you're meant to, and Anne will know this, you're meant to remember your most inspirational teachers with great affection. And I think I should do, although I was probably quite small when Jean was trying to teach me. So that was a great call to make, and of course someone you know from old. And she was asking after you. I was able to tell her you were happy at Glade, which is everything for us. So and then the weekend before we had a nice journey out, me and Wendy, on a clearish sort of grey, maybe clear day. We went out exploring the levels, and maybe you remember Wendy is consumed by all things to do with quilting, which is her passion at the moment, and it's providing a lovely creative avenue for her to dwell in. And she's doing various courses, one of which is a foundation course. But the course that drove our particular trip last weekend was her quilt judging course, which in theory should allow her, if she ever wants to go to exhibitions and do judging and be part of the kind of, even paid for it, part of a group that rates how quilts match against others and how creative they are. So anyway, one of her muses is to discover what particular material that artists use for things, how she can represent it well. And she has chosen willow, and willow grows on the levels here, as it does down in Lochry, I seem to remember, in County Tyrone. And we have, I guess, the vestiges of what was once a huge industry with basket making and things, when willow was the go-to material for making containers. In fact, our strawberries used to be contained in them in Cheddar long ago, I hear. So anyway, we were making our trip through down off the hills here, down through the levels to kind of an area not too far from where Patience had a house. But that took us, first of all, again, part of the Wendy's area of study, took us past the Willow Man. Now, the Willow Man is a tall structure that you can see on the M5. Maybe we drove past it with you and Dad. Made of willow on a steel frame, but nonetheless, this giant who is like other large statues, like the Angels of the North and things. It's quite an iconic image here locally. But the poor old Willow Man, time hasn't been that kind to him, and he is falling apart a bit. But he still retains some of his sort of giant or kingly majesty up there. So we stopped off there for Wendy to take some pictures, and we gave Fergal a little run around there. He is a bit sad in places. He's lost his head pretty well, and his arms are all a bit threadbare. But his main trunk and legs still kind of retain that muscular power that of him striding forth across the levels. So that was quite nice. And then we headed off to this basket making place. Oh no, not before we stopped on the route. We were lucky to see the signs for this, for the Battle of Cechmore, which was the last battle on English soil in 1685. So, and there's a little visitor centre in the church there, which we could go and see, which gives something of the history and tries to bring it alive for people. And the idea is you see what it says in the church, and then you go for the walk around where the battle site is. We didn't do the walk, but maybe we'll retain that for when the weather was a bit warmer. Anyway, it was all around Charles II's son, who once James II came to the throne. So Charles II's son, who was apparently illegitimate, he wanted his claim to the throne turn him into the next king. And I understand that Charles II was, James II was rather unpopular. And we probably know him as James, King James, who King Billy fought Battle of Boyne and finished him off in the end. Anyway, so this was 4 years before William and Mary, William, King Billy, was invited to come to rule Britain, and when James II then fled to Ireland and sought to try and reclaim the English throne on Irish soil. But yeah, so this was also known as the Pitchfork Rebellion, which you might remember. So James II, being Catholic, I think he was unpopular with a certain part of the establishment here in Britain. But also, I think he was quite tough, and people found him unpopular, so they were quite keen to get rid of him. So there was quite a lot of support here, especially in Somerset, to support this Charles II's son. In fact, he was called the Duke of Monmouth, and apart from being called the Pitchfork Rebellion, I think it was called the Monmouth Rebellion. And it did end in failure, but we were quite moved by some of the stories about how the various armies manoeuvred around what was very flat and boggy land and ditches and rivers, and ended up being sadly destroyed by the cannon and the cavalry and the infantry. And I think the Duke of Monmouth, he did flee and was found in a ditch somewhere in Devon, and a lot of the people who were captured in his army ended up, let me think, what's it called? The Judge Jeffreys, yes, with the bloody assizes. They ended up hanging, made quite an example of them. In fact, some of them, we understand, were hung on Hanging Rock, just round the corner from here in Cheddar, and remained hanging for many years, just on bits of string, becoming less and less. Anyway, it was quite moving to see all this stuff, and quite a surprise to come across this. And of course, it was only 4 years later that history then served William III much better when James II went. So that was that. So quite interesting to see that. But then we went on to this Willow Centre in not far from Western Zoyland. It does sound exotic, actually. It's an old Anglo-Saxon name. And quite lovely, actually, to walk through through these willow fields, and also to go into the museum which they have there and see some of what they used to create with willow as kind of a cottage everyday industry, where not just baskets and things. I suppose coffins now seem to be the most popular thing, willow coffins, but also things like the creels that used to catch the eels in the ditches here, or the salmon. I guess they're kind of creel things, but these sort of funneled net things, rather beautiful in their way. And I mentioned something about the strawberries here. Something called the pottle, a kind of flat cylindrical basket without a handle, which you could fill with your strawberries and stack on top of each other, and they would then be transported to probably the train, and then off to London. And then of course they could be put on people's heads, one on top of each other, and carried in the markets. So a kind of sensible thing. And then that was all replaced by punnets, which actually were made of different materials. But that was quite interesting. But what I was interested to see also, from your perspective, was a particular rather huge net basket, I guess more, made of willow, which was for retting the flax after it was grown. Because you described that as being put in dams, and I didn't know how they did that, how they held it in one place. But it's just possible you would be familiar with something similar, as you spoke of it around the dams at Cumber. So after that, I'm walking in these flooded fields some of it alongside the River Tone, which is the river that flows through Taunton. We were going back in, and the dusk was beginning to grow then, and of course, were we not surprised to see these great floods? Well, you'll know them as murmurations of starlings as they were flying over in this sort of whoosh of sound, as they were all heading off to other parts of the levels to do their roosting, which was a kind of fitting end for what was a lovely day. So we'll do that again, and we might be able to have other things to uncover. Nice bit of history, as well as some nice sights. So I'll maybe tell you about that another day. But I'm hoping you're well, and just to say, Fergal too, he's also quite well, working hard in London as a market analyst for a financial PR company. I won't even try and explain too much about that, but he has to get up early and look at the news on particular companies, and then feed that news to other people, who then turn it into maybe news items and articles for things. But he's part of a team, and I think he is valued. He's paid a reasonable salary, I guess, from my point of view, although he says it's not that much for London. But he's going to do this for a bit, get lots of experience, and maybe see where that takes him. And he's mixing with all sorts of people. And just to say, he was invited the other day for drinks with the chairman of the Conservative Party. I think they get buttered up because there's power in this information, particularly with politicians, but also financial men too. Anyway, it's nice to share with this, and I hope this gets to you in one piece, and we send you lots and lots of love. Yeah, missing you lots, Mum, and all the rest of you, Man and Peter. Oh, and Lindsay too. Speak soon then. Bye-bye.